Hello viewers, just a super quick video to share with you the news today from BMC of their brand new full suspension gravel bike. So go through the details, share my reaction and get your reaction by leaving a comment down below. Okay, let's dive in. So this is a brand new BMC URS LT, or short for unrestricted long travel, and it's a full suspension version of the previous gravel bike you might have seen on my channel. I've ridden the bike in two different versions, a yellow one and a purple one with a low level SRAM and a high level SRAM group set. I'll put a link down below if you want to check it out. And it is a bike, it's fair to say, I've been really impressed with. Firstly, there's the elastomer soft tail rear end giving incredible cushioning over rough ground. And then there's a mountain bike inspired geometry with a slack head angle and a long reach and a short stem, giving really good planted, stable handling when you are riding off-road. But the one thing it really lacked and the one thing it was missing was some sort of suspension at the front that tamed down the stiffness from that front end to match the soft tail rear end. Well, it's clear that BMC will watch my videos, listening to my feedback, and have now added a suspension fork. So BMC have partnered with Hi-Ride, an Italian company who a few years ago helped Pinarello to develop a full suspension dogma for races like Paris-Roubaix. And BMC and Hi-Ride had developed a system inside the head tube which offers 20mm of front suspension. It's called micro travel technology and pairs with the 10mm of soft tail rear end from the elastomer. And yes, I know what you're thinking, because I thought the same thing when I opened up the press release this morning. It looks reminiscent of the famous iconic Cannondale head shock from about 20 years ago, which they first developed for their mountain bikes all those years ago. The micro travel technology, as it's called, uses a coil spring, so it should be nice and sensitive to bumps with a hydraulic damper to control the action. It can be tuned for different rider weights with 3 springs to choose from and a preload adjustment for further fine tuning. And you can lock it out with a dial on the top for road riding where you don't need the suspension working. Now, it seems an air spring would have been lighter than a coil spring, but BMC says there's no weight penalty for the system, but doesn't give an actual weight for the frame. And like the Future Shock on the Specialized Diverge, BMC chose a coil spring for the sensitivity it offers. There's no stitching in the coil spring system, which is important on smooth gravel, especially when you're dealing with so little suspension travel. So it should be very responsive to small and medium-sized impacts. It also reckons very little maintenance with a spring compared to an air spring and isn't subject to overheating on long descents. The head tube on the current BMC URS was pretty tall compared to other gravel bikes, and with this additional 20mm of suspension travel, BMC says the geometry is unchanged. So it retains the same stack and reach and the same slack 70-degree head angle with a long reach and short stem borrowed from the mountain bike world. There's also a whopping 4cm of stack height, that's about 4cm, isn't it, give or take, available in the system, so you can fine tune the fit to suit your requirements and the way you ride your bike. Besides that new front suspension, there's a few other useful additions on the brand new BMC URS LT, and probably the biggest one, especially if you're a bike packing or long distance riding person, is you now fit a dynamo with internal routing for that dynamo system. So no batteries on your lights needed anymore, use a dynamo, and it's great for long distance riding. There's also internal dropper post routing, external gear cable routing for mechanical group sets, and as before, it's one bike only. That's to allow clearance for up to a 45mm wide tyre. The tyre clearance on this bike is the same as before. At this launch, it's only available with carbon frame and a choice of 2 models, costing €6,000 and €8,000. That top-end bike gets a SRAM Force 1x Eagle mullet gearing with a 1052 cassette and carbon wheels and WTB Radar tyres. On the cheaper model, you get a SRAM Rival and Eagle mullet gearing with DT Swiss G1800 alloy wheels on the entry-level model. Interesting that they're using the mullet with a 1052 cassette and not SRAM new 1044, but I guess they're going for outright range for maximum climbability on this new bike. Those are the details on the new bike then. Let's talk more widely about the impact of suspension on gravel bikes and whether it's a good thing or not. But it's clear that suspension is creeping into the gravel bike sector, with quite a few brands now embracing and developing their own versions of suspension on gravel bikes, with many different solutions now available, and I've ridden most of them. So when BMC says this bike is taking gravel to the next level, Well, I can be a judge of that when I get my hands on one to review, hopefully very soon. Stay tuned for that. And I can't wait to see how the bike compares to other models on the market, like the Specialized Diverge with a Future Shock, the current or previous BMC URS with a soft tail, there's a Redshift suspension stem and seat post, and most recently there's the RockShot Rudy suspension fork, which I've been testing. You might have seen my video on that, link above if you missed it, on a Salsa Warbird, and I've been really impressed. You might think suspension is pointless and big tyres are all you need on a gravel bike for suspension, but interestingly, BMC has done some testing here and has shared the results of this testing, and it's the first sort of detailed testing I've seen on the impacts of gravel, riding over gravel on a gravel bike, and the difference of suspension and big tyres. So really interesting here. So let's have a look at what they've shared with us. It says the big tyres are fine up until you deal with big impacts which a tyre can't squash, and the suspension overcomes the limitation of the big tyre. It claims the suspension dampens 46% of the impacts that generate vibrations in the 10 to 50 Hz range. The bigger the impact, the lower the vibration frequency. And what all this means, data aside, is less fatigue from those impacts going through your arms and legs, more control and more speed because the bike's not being bounced around as much, and a faster, better ride. And this is true if you look at mountain bikes, where a full suspension mountain bike compared to a rigid or hardtail mountain bike is faster over rough terrain, roots and rocks. It's comfier and easier to ride and gives you more control and more confidence and more speed. So if that works in mountain biking, then the same should be true of gravel, especially if you're really pushing gravel bikes to their limits, as I do here in the UK, by not just riding smooth gravel and dirt roads, but also mountain biking trails and roots and rocks and bigger obstacles. And I know many people will think that suspension is overkill on a gravel bike, that a big tyre is all you need for suspension when you're riding off-road, and that if you want suspension on a gravel bike, you're better off on a hardtail or full suspension mountain bike. But for me, as I'm starting to find out by riding bikes like the Specialized Diverge, the Redshift and the RockShot Rudy suspension fork, and hopefully BMC URS LT when it's available to test, is that I think there is space for a small amount of suspension on a gravel bike without stepping on the toes of a mountain bike, and retaining that clear distinction between a gravel bike for the versatility and the speed they offer over a mountain bike, to make sure that the two are very separate, that a mountain bike is very different to a gravel bike with suspension, and they're not actually the same things. It's not actually a mountain bike with drop bars, which many people will say in the comment section, I'm sure of it. Those are my thoughts though. At this point, I urge you to share your thoughts down below. Is it a thumbs up, a thumbs down? Are you loving it? Are you hating it? Are you enjoying the direction that gravel bikes are going in? Or do you think it's a step too far? One thing's clear though, while brands like Specialized and Redshift and BMC and RockShot are pursuing suspension on gravel bikes and bringing that technology and benefits from mountain biking over to gravel bikes in an exciting direction for many people, there are still as many or even more pure rigid gravel bikes to choose from. So I don't see a future where all gravel bikes have suspension. I think it's just offering that option for people who want it, but there are just as many options and more options for a pure rigid gravel bike if that's your thing. So don't worry, the future isn't full suspension gravel bikes, but there are going to be more options come to market. And personally, I'm really excited by this sort of trickling down from the mountain bike world into gravel sector in a new way that retains the versatility and the speed and ride everywhere nature of a gravel bike while keeping it separate from a mountain bike. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the brand new BMC URS LT, and a bike I can't wait to get my hands on and see how it rides on my local trails and how it compares to other bikes like Specialized Diverge, that RockShot Rudy and the Redshift suspension stem and seat post, and see whether it's a great thing or a bad thing, it's overkill, or just the right amount of suspension to make a gravel bike more appealing, faster and smoother on rough terrain. And if you want to see my review on the BMC URS, the normal version, then click that video link up there. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that button up there. Okay, thanks for watching. See you all again very soon.